Thanks everyone for joining the Future Proof podcast. My name is Alex. I'm here with David. He is the owner of Expanso, and we're going to go into a little bit about what their business does, the industry, and a little bit about their background. So David, thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you go into a little bit about what Expanso does and your background?
Yeah. Look, I love being on here. It's fantastic to be able to get out and chat with folks. My background is there's been a real advance in the industry in the past, call it 15, 20 years, where, if you're old like me, you grew up like building servers in single data centers and making them all work together. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But with the start of things like Amazon, AWS, and Google Cloud, and Azure Cloud, and all the clouds that exist now, there was this idea that you could kind of abstract away, like, hey, I don't need to think about a single machine. I can think about like a whole cluster of machines and deal with them all at once, and say, hey, you know what, cluster, you go figure out where to run this job, where to run this app or this website or this whatever. You figure it out. And that was great. And things were good for a while. But it turns out that your data for your business, is likely not being generated in a data center in Iowa or Oregon or Tokyo or Paris. It's likely being generated in the real world. And I know it sounds like an easy problem because you're like, well, can't you just save it to the cloud? But it turns out that moving that data from where your customers, where your scenarios, your fields, your tractors, your vehicles are into your data warehouse in the cloud to use all that great new AI is a hard problem. And so we built a platform to make that much, much easier, to let you do it efficiently and faster and with security and privacy in mind, where you control exactly how that data moves from here to there instead of, having to move it to the cloud first.
Got it. So is that what inspired you to create Expanso? Is just kind of like the old way of doing it, that centralized everything model really wasn't working for businesses anymore, or kind of what was your kind of like signal to kind of create the company?
Yeah, it's interesting because I had this. You ever get into a situation where you realize, like, after working on something, you're like, oh, actually, I've kind of been working on this for like 10 years, and you just couldn't put a name to it. That's kind of how it is. Before this, I worked at Amazon and Microsoft and Google, and in specific, while I was at Google, which was about 10 years this year, 10 years ago, I was working on a big distributed platform that did that, like, separation of compute and jobs and all those kind of things. It was called Kubernetes. Very weird tech name, but it is what it is. And what we kept seeing is people saying, hey, you know what? This is great. This is what I need to separate myself from the computers. How do I separate myself from the data? Meaning, I don't want to have to log in, and I don't want to have to run on 10 different machines and do this and do that. I just want to tell a bunch of machines, no matter where they are, what to do, right? And that's what we did. So I realized that, like, even then I was trying to solve this very problem, but which is, how do you take a job and hand it to something and say, I don't know where data is in the world. Like, in my world, I don't know where this data is. I want you to go run a job over that stuff. And that's what it is. So like I said, it really was about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, I kept hearing from customers, great, do this, but for data. And after some twists and turns and working in AI and working in, other distributed compute environments, we spun this up.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's funny that you saw the need for it that long ago, and it kind of just
Well,
over time.
early is the same as wrong, right? Like, so I don't know that I could have even launched this 10 years ago because it's not obvious that the problems were big enough. Like, my favorite advice to give to people building startups or building anything new is first understand what will never change, right? Meaning, what are the things that in 10, 100, 1,000 years, it's not going to change? And I think those three things are: one, data is getting bigger everywhere, right? Not just in your central data center. It really is getting bigger, in all the places. Two, the speed of light isn't getting any faster. So, to some degree, having any distance between your decision and the data is going to take a long time. And three, regulations are growing around data. How do you restrict it? How do you run it? How do you do all that stuff? If you believe
Sure.
those three things, you're going to have a solution that solves for it, right? And that's what we are trying to offer. And 10 years ago, you probably still could have said that, but like maybe the size of the solution could have been smaller or something along those lines. That's what I would say. So at the time, I would say maybe it was a little bit early.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good. That's good awareness from you on like the product and the market you're going into, that maybe, there was a need for it, but maybe it wasn't just the right time for you to actually be successful at launching it. You know what I mean? So, you talk about compute over data. What does that process actually look like in the real world?
Yeah, so to break it down for folks, and I'm sure this is going to be like basic for you, but like so just to make sure that everyone understands, the way to think about it is, let's use the most boring example in the world. Let's say I have a supermarket. And in the supermarket, I got 10 cash registers. Okay. Even in the most advanced supermarkets, they're not going to want to have those cash registers send directly to the cloud, right? Because things could go down, or there could be a lot of data, maybe it overwhelms. Even a sophisticated supermarket might only have a cable modem or something. So there's some amount of compute, those are those registers running there in that place, but the jobs that you have to run are coming from somewhere else, right? So somewhere in whatever, Wichita, there is a data analyst who's trying to figure out where to put Pop Tarts next week. And they want to go and see real time data, transaction data of what's happening in every store. They don't want to wait for it to pull all that data into a central repository before they did action. Because even though it sounds like, well, isn't that simple? Turns out it's not. It turns out it takes a long time, comes in bad form, and so on. So compute over data means I'm going to take my job. I'm going to take my question about this data, or I'm going to take the way I want to change this data to be a better fit for my back end, or whatever. I'm going to take that compute job and move it to where the data is being created. So now I'm going to take that job and push it into the store itself. And so maybe it's onto the registers. More likely than not, it's onto some machine sitting in a manager's office in the back room. But that's where I'm going to run the data. And then the register data flows into that back office. The job flows down from, again, Wichita. But at the end of it, I'm able to get answers without having to move the data. I just say like, okay, number of Pop-Tarts was, 431 was sold last week. And you could do that. So that's what compute over data is. It's taking your desired work, compute job, and moving it to where the data is being created.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Now, for you guys, which teams or what kind of companies get the most immediate value from what you guys do? Is that AI teams, data engineers, governance, kind of?
So I always like to say that the cost usually, or the biggest value usually comes from where there's the biggest cost is the easiest way to like map to it, right? And that typically is one of two people see the biggest things right now. One, you might have enormous cost that is your team is spending time. And I always joke about this. I'll go stand on stage and people are like, I'm good and my data pipeline's good. I was like, you know what? Go talk to your data analysts, your data engineers today, and ask them how much of last week they spent debugging a pipeline, figuring out why those registers all of a sudden, for some reason, stopped sending in data, right? Because they were shut off, because someone, put a backhoe through the floor. Maybe no one was buying Pop-Tarts. No one knows. And that happens all the time. The number of times data professionals will say, geez, I can't believe this pipeline has been broken for a week and a half. Those people, when you're spending a majority of your team working on that, instead of advancing your customers, very, very easy win. Because we can go in and we can help make that pipeline better, faster, cheaper, more secure, more reliable in literally hours. Hours. Nothing complicated about it. You just drop us in and magically the data flows. And yet you're able to get a whole bunch of value out of it. So that's kind of category one. The second big one is where the dollars are there, right? So if you are already spending $1 million or more a month on your data, or a year, excuse me, on your data backend, that's Snowflake or Splunk or Databricks or Redshift from Amazon or Cosmos DB or BigQuery or whatever, right? There are many, many, many of them out there. If you're already spending $1 million, you can either, one, cut your costs, which is certainly something that people do. because we could drop in and show you how to do that. Or you can put those dollars to better use. Because a lot of times people are like, no, this is budgeted. I don't even want to cut costs. Or maybe I want to increase costs. But what I want to do is I want to add in AI into it, or I want to add in better prediction over when Pop Tarts are going to run out or whatever. And I want to reallocate those dollars, still spending on the back end that I've already chosen, but I want to do it more smartly, and we can help with that too. So in both those cases, that's where the easiest wins are. And again, I know I'm the CEO and I'm supposed to sound like this, but I'm telling you, we are literally talking about zero to value in hours, like hours counted in, sub 1,000 minutes. Like I'm telling you, we can make it happen because that's what we built it for.
Well, that's a very, very good business model. Obviously, people, especially in when your value is saving them time, effort, everything like that. I mean, that's the biggest value add that you can provide, especially if you can do it in a matter of, minutes, hours, not days or weeks or months. So that's huge. So industry level, trends, things like that. So why is data centralization becoming a bottleneck in modern AI and analytics?
Yeah. I mean, it's purely a numbers game, right? And you're like, well, I'm a mid-sized company and I have like 4 whatever branch offices. It can't be that bad. I mean, it turns out it is. I'll encourage all of your listeners to like look around wherever you're sitting right now. Look at your thermostat, look at your phone, look at your computer, look at your, you name it, camera, video cameras on the wall. Maybe they're listening on a device that's recording them for transcription purposes right now. All these things are data, and the networking folks are great. Really, they are great, but they're never going to keep up because you're talking about just a pure combinatorial issue. Number of devices times amount of data that each one is pushing is just much larger than networking by any stretch. And like I said, even if it wasn't, what do you call it, isn't there. The speed of light will always be a gating factor. So now if you're like, hey, you know what? I want to understand what is happening with those Pop Tarts going back again, but I first have to collect all the data, and then I have to move it to the cloud, and then I have to process it in my ETL, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do that, instead of just doing the action right there in Office, so much the better.
For sure. What do you think the biggest misconceptions companies have about building AI ready data pipelines?
Well, the first big thing is that you could just hand it anything generically. So many people think that it's like ChatGPT, right? Or Gemini, which is my new favorite, or Anthropic, which I use all the time. I mean, and there are so many good ones out there. I don't want to like pick and choose. But how do you interact with that, right? Well, what you do is you sit down and you dictate a bunch of words, you type a bunch of words, ask a question, and then it comes back with you an answer, and so on. And that just doesn't work. The biggest reason is because you're not giving enough context to the AI in order to give you a good decision. What do I mean by that? Let's say, for the sake of argument, that I'm gathering data from 2 different supermarkets in the world, right? One in Florida and one in California. And I get a notice that 0 Pop Tarts have been sold at 9 p.m., right? And the store's open till 11. Well, that seems like a warning, right? Like, oh, maybe something went wrong. But I didn't give it enough context, right? I didn't tell it that this was the store in Florida and I was measuring it on West Coast time because that's where headquarters is, right? So now that's a midnight store because what do you call it? The time zones were all wrong. That's what I mean by context. Where is it? What's going on? What's the information? Is it in the right structure? Is it the minimum amount of information necessary to pass on? If I don't need to pass on the entire rest of the bill with the coupons and the this and the that, and here's the credit card code and whatever in order to make this prediction, then don't pass it on. And that will make AI smarter too. So it's both give it the right information and don't give it the wrong information, and AI will be smarter. So that's a really big thing. The other thing is like, this is very much a personal opinion. I worked in AI for a long time. There will be a human in the loop, as it's called, for a long, long time. Now, the human in the loop will get smarter, smaller, or change, or or so on and so forth. There's lots of different directions it can go. But the idea that an AI simply works on my behalf and never needs checking in, that's just not going to happen. And it's very important that people understand that, because when you start building for that, then it just makes everything easier and smarter, right? You're like, okay, I get it. I'm going to get an answer back here and it's going to work. All right, it's going to be 90% of the way there, but I'm going to have a human just check it out, because it kind of goes back to that context thing. It's really hard to pass on everything you need about what you're doing because you don't know what the machine needs to understand. And so that's probably a second big thing.
Okay. Now, speaking a little bit about like the challenges in that. So when you're speaking with enterprises, where do they hit their biggest data, friction? Is it cost, latency, governance, fragmentation of tools? What do you see that's most common?
So that's a really interesting point. What I like to say is it almost always comes down to shared responsibility, buying decision, for lack of a better term, right? So you go in, take that data example I was talking about earlier. If I go into the CIO and I say, hey, you know what? I see you're spending $2 million a year on this thing. Wouldn't you like to spend 1.5? Sounds pretty good to me. Like, show me how. Well, the CIO is not doing the implementation. The CIO doesn't have the security like understanding. The CIO is, doesn't know what the head of product has dictated as a set of backlog. And so even though this is really clear to them, they may not have full awareness. So when we go in and make buying decisions or help people understand what the hell's going on, they have to pull from A and pull from B and pull from C and say, oh, you know what? It's actually this group decision that needs to come together. Now, we try and make it very, very small and let people streamline it into whatever they need. But candidly, it is one of those things where every organization's different. Every organization has different priorities. And even if I can give you a clear guidance, and again, anyone listening to this call, if you have a data problem, I guarantee, that is a literal guarantee, I will save you 2 times as much as it costs to deploy us in the first 6 months, or give you the first 6 months for free. Full stop. Right? So it is a no question winner. Don't mean to turn this into a sales platform, but like even that message, which I have given many times, they're like, that does sound good, but I still need to pull in these other people. And that's the thing that's the slowest.
Interesting. So I was literally just going to ask you kind of what's the hardest challenge you've had while scaling Expanso? Is it market education, integration depth, or just kind of shifting that legacy thinking?
So, I mean, it really is a little bit of everything, right? Like, I'll go into very sophisticated data teams and they'll be like, well, I don't own this data and I don't own this data. I'm not sure what to do about it. There's absolutely a big market penetration element of this, which is, lots and lots of people are like told by data consultants or data platforms that like, well, this is the way to do it. Just shift it all to the cloud. And you're like, well, that's just not a good idea, dude. I don't know how to break it to you. Again, no one's saying don't go cloud. It's just be thoughtful. And so a lot of people like around awareness, they just aren't even aware there was an alternative because this is such a standard and it's really been drilled into us, for whatever, 15, 20 years.
Same. Yeah. So what are you doing? What are you doing right now to kind of solve that for Expanso? Like, how are you getting the message across? How are you getting your word out there and kind of bringing that to market?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky because in my former job, I got a lot of experience talking to a lot of folks in infrastructure and cloud and so on. It's pretty straightforward for me to either get a pitch, have a pitch or get on stage or certainly go attend a conference and meet a bunch of smart people to chat about it. It does tend to be one-on-one conversations that ends up moving these things forward. There's, again, just no easy way to go faster than that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess the same bottleneck that every company has, expanding
Yeah,
and
I
growing.
will say this is one area where I would say that AI is very nice, but it is also, I will say, I think it's created a real challenge because the amount of slop that is out there right now around AI and ML is not small. And as a result, what do you call it? You do get it's hard to rise above the noise, really hard.
All right. Well, if to kind of help listeners out there, so if you have engineering leaders or anyone like, kind of can help buy the product listening, what is one action they could take today to future proof their pipelines? What should it be?
That is such an interesting question. I would say the number one thing to do, whether or not you use us or someone else to do it, is get lineage, get information about the source of the data into the start of your pipeline the second you touch it. So I do not care where this stuff comes from. And you can read so many things. I'm writing a book on it, actually. But you can read so many things about lineage and things like that out there. And yes, there are very, very, very sophisticated things that you could do. But I am telling you, if you do nothing else but record the second data comes into your system, where, when, what system, what service, if you can, the reason you're collecting the data at all, and attach that to the data and make sure it carries through all the way, you are going to thank yourself forever for that. Because the number of times you open up a CSV or you open up a flat text file and you're like, what the hell is this stuff again? And where did it come from? Like your future self is going to thank you forever.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good advice. All right, well, cool. Well, if I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but if someone's out there, wanting to either get in touch with you, get a quote, do a demo, whatever it is, what's the best way to get in touch with you and contact you?
So I'm everywhere on social, on LinkedIn, on this, that, and the other. The easiest thing is we got it painted all over the site. Go to expanso.io. That's expanso.io. And right there it says talk to an expert, and that will be routed to someone on our team, or heck, say my name and I'll take your call directly.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, David, for joining me today. It's a pleasure.
Of course. Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. All right. Well, cool. Thanks, man.
Thank you.